Welcome to VR Day, the first virtual reality meeting in Paraíba, Brazil, supported by the federal government, by Aldir Blanc Law, and the Municipal City Hall of João Pessoa. It's a huge pleasure to be with Bryan Crosswhite. Bryan é CEO da XR Global, empresa de treinamento especializada em realidade virtual. Bryan também trabalhou como consultor internacional e especializado em mercados emergentes, fornecendo gerenciamento de programas para crescimento econômico, assistência em nível de empresa, projetos comerciais e de agronegócios. Bryan, welcome to VR Day. It's a pleasure to be with you here and our co-host, João Pedro.
All right, so hello everyone. My name is JP, João Pedro, just call me JP. We are here with Bryan Crosswhite. Bryan, thank you so much for joining us. It's an honor to have someone that is building not only the metaverse, but it's been a pretty long time in the business and know lots of the ins and outs of the game. And we are just happy and excited to chat with you about VR, the impact, what you do, why you do it. So, all right. So I'm JP from 20XR Education. I'm here to talk with Bryan Crosswhite. Bryan, what's up, man? How's everything?
Hey, it's a pleasure to meet you guys. And thank you for having me. It's an honor to be a part of this amazing time to be able to share what virtual reality is doing across the globe. And for us to be able to do this in Brazil is amazing. Thanks to Priscilla and you for pulling this thing together. It's an awesome thing. So I'm doing great though.
All right, cool. So yeah, so let's talk with let's talk about you. Who's Bryan? Why do you do what do you do, in terms of VR? Tell us a little bit about yourself, how you started in the game, how you started with let's say it's a tough market. It's being it's a lot of people are working now in the field, but you have been in this game for a while. So tell us about why you do it, what you do it. We would love to hear more about you.
Well, interesting. My background I was an economist and then technologist, worked in emerging markets throughout the Middle East back in the day, and also some Latin America. I owned a company in Caracas, Venezuela, in the energy sector, doing training back when I was very young, when I had more hair. And I actually always had a love for education, and especially in the emerging markets and in the international development community. And so I was with a company called Innovate, who introduced a lot of the VR technology to the US government. And so I worked in that space. And then from there, we expanded the company. I grew my division, which was more of the international sector, to Africa. And unfortunately, that company didn't really work out. I was the vice president of the company. And so I took over the international side and launched XR Global today. And XR Global was formed in, it's a US-based company, but we are based out of Africa. And so most of our teams are in Cape Town, South Africa. We're in Kigali, Rwanda, Maputo, Mozambique, Nampula, Mozambique. So we have a good spread over the southern and eastern part of Africa doing this type of work. And our whole mission in what we're doing is about changing the way education is delivered. We have seen throughout the years, especially in emerging markets and these NGOs around the world who are doing education, and they bring people together in classrooms and try to deliver this education. And we're seeing low retention rates, very, very low. And so we wanted to change that up and disrupt the way agricultural training, and that's one of our markets that we work in, is doing. And we wanted to change the way everyone is learning, because we've seen that the brain doesn't absorb information the same way as VR. So we studied all this, and our mission, changing the way everything is being delivered in education and changing the impact of this market and making VR the leading way of delivering education.
What I think it's amazing about what you do, like we talked last week, is I mean, most people are working in VR in developed countries. So like it's very well established countries, especially regarding hardware. So like you are in Africa and you are working in emerging markets, and like Brazil has a lot of difficulties with hardware. Like it's tough for us to get a Quest 2 without being expensive, and etc. etc. So tell us a little bit about that. Like you are working in emerging markets with a very niche, very specific tech. So tell us a little bit about that, about how it's like to work in VR in those emerging markets, please.
Yeah, it's a challenge. Like you said, we have hardware issues where we're trying to get hardware into countries. A lot of the countries that we work in require 100% VAT or import tax or import tariffs on those products. So imagining getting an Oculus Quest 2 into a country is going to cost me 700 euros versus 300 US dollars that I would normally get in the US. So it is a challenge. So we have logistical issues. So a lot of times we are going in doing courses, so we're able to go in and bring those devices into country, and that's how we get our product or our equipment into country. Interesting, take a step back. We started with mobile VR, so we were doing the cardboard and on the mobile phones early on, and we thought this is the way of future. And then, as we see in today, with the progression of metaverse, we're all switching over to the Oculus Quest, the Picos, and the DPVRs and the HTCs of the world. So that has been a big challenge. I think the biggest challenge that we've had, beside just the hardware side, is getting people to understand that what is VR. And I run into this all the time when I go to the airport. And I'm going through customs and they pull me over side and say, hey, you have 20 VR headsets in your bag. What is this? And we joke about it and like, well, this is a scuba diving helmet or face mask. And they laugh, but we put them actually in it and then they are blown away. And so when we start showing people and how the technology works, it stimulates a lot in their brain and they really want it. Our big challenge in Africa is not necessarily the price point, because we have lowered our barrier of entry into that market. So all of our development is done in country already. But I think the biggest challenge is, how do we demonstrate this without putting a headset on someone? I just had an instance just recently where we sent YouTube videos and like, look at it on YouTube, and we have the headset coming on and then it shows the head movement. And the guy just said, I just don't understand it. I don't get what you're showing me. And then we bring them a headset, put them into the headset, and just a light bulb switches. So this is a big challenge for us in emerging markets. We are working with people who've never even used a smartphone. Most of the people that we're training don't even have electricity. And then we put them in a VR headset. It changes their life. And the adoption rate that we're seeing in emerging markets is 100%. We haven't had one trainee say, I can't do this. Everyone is like, when can we get more modules? When can we get more education? So we're seeing this as an opportunity. It's almost like 5G. We find it in most rural areas of Africa, and it's hard to find a good 5G network in the US. So they're embracing the latest technology because they're not used to the technology of having computer-based training or instructor-led training like we have been used to. So it's a great market for us. There's some big challenges, but overall, we're making a lot of progress.
Yeah, it's great to hear because, like what you do shows a lot about these emerging markets like Africa. Africa is, it's a behemoth for the future in terms of economic growth. Like it's a big promise, and it's great to hear that Africa is growing their economy, and that people like you are investing in the country, bringing not only technology, but other, educational solutions that can widespread, bringing a better experience for everybody in the ecosystem. So like, I want to talk a little bit about educating future clients and stakeholders. So because that's really important. People don't understand that when you're like, I have the same difficulty as well with 20XR education, because, you always have to educate your prospect, your future customer. You have to educate, like, what are the possibilities with VR? So for example, are we going to what kind of training, what are your goals? And here's how VR can accelerate that. Here's how VR can scale that. And these are the challenges and obstacles, and we can overcome that like that. So like explaining that it's hard. It's like, what's your process behind it, in like commercial wise? Like, how do you educate your future stakeholders?
So yeah, so that's a good question. There's two different ways that we're looking at education. First way, because a lot of times, excuse me, we're in a market where data could be expensive. So putting a headset where it is using data from the web could be a challenge in these areas. So, but there is a market for that. And then there's a market for the headset usage or putting someone in this education in VR where it's not using data. We have been out many times because we have partnered with Pico in the past, and we also have DPVR and Oculus headsets. We would go out into the field where we wouldn't have an internet connection, and we'd have to put the person in the headset and load it before we get there. And it tracks all the assessments. And then when the headset gets back to an internet connection, then it uploads it to the Google Analytics, to the dashboards that we have to be able to show the reporting. That is one of the ways that we've done a lot of training, is with the offline version of VR. And then I think, we are seeing that as a lot of people really like that because of the cost of data. With another aspect of what we're doing from an educational perspective is providing that live education. Live education is a little different, where you're putting them in a virtual classroom. And we're seeing that as a new thing in the marketplace. We've been doing it for quite a while in development, but we haven't really started, getting it really out into the space because of the data costs. We're going back to the telecoms and asking them, can they provide the data for free for the use of this? And we're seeing some positive messaging coming from the telecom saying, hey, we'll provide you the data. So now we'll be able to educate people in their village with these headsets live. They could talk to each other. They could communicate to their nearest village person who is in the same class. So we can bring 10 to 15 people together and teach them about nutrition, prenatal care, wash, and agriculture, how to do, what is the full maize value chain. These are important things that we're doing to train and educate people in the learning development phase. I'll tell you one thing about VR that's been a positive. In Africa, we have spent billions of dollars of bringing people out of villages, bring them to the capital cities, and we train them. And most of the time, those people find that they want to stay in those capital cities. So the population rises. We have, there's just a lot of things that happen from it. Poverty increases. But with VR, we're keeping people in the villages, or we're not keeping them, but we're encouraging them to learn in their village and to build an economy of scale right where they're at. So we're providing that education. So that's the positive side of what VR is doing. And that's really one thing that we're doing. And then seeing that seat time is one of those areas that we really stress with our clients, that we could save 80% in that area. So that's a positive thing of what we're doing. And so this is the way of the future. This is going to be the latest, the next major generation of education, like computer-based training was for decades.
Yeah, this is awesome. I mean, just let's think about that for a second. Like the standard education, people will travel and they will leave their village, which is a very poor area, and they may not come back, or they don't have they're not frequent there. They're not there all the time. So they cannot have like big or long-term projects there. So their village ends up being, without the qualification, the professional qualification that they could have. In VR, with the scalability of VR, we can provide that. And that's awesome. That's awesome to hear. Actually, you touch a point where I would love to, me and Priscilla, we would love to hear about the impact, your methodology, your case studies. So if feel free to open your presentation and talk about those projects, because you work not only in emerging markets, but you work with this approach in agriculture. So agriculture, yeah, agricultural training in VR in emerging market like Africa. We would love to hear that. I think the audience is excited to hear and to see what you do and how you do it. So just feel free to make your to host your presentation.
Okay, so I believe you see my screen, correct?
Yeah.
So yes, we started in agriculture. We're in several different sectors. We've done construction, we've done agriculture, we've done fintech, we've done entrepreneurial training, and now we're into healthcare space as well, doing healthcare training in Kenya. But let's talk about the impact. XR Global has been doing this since 2019, and we've seen a large impact in virtual reality. This picture that you see here is in Rwanda, where one of our programs alone have trained over 65,000 people in the last year with the use of VR. And these are the headsets that we're using. As you know, you shouldn't be using a headset in the middle of the sunlight, so make sure we're under a tree, and we advise them not to let the lens hit the sunlight. But this is the type of training we're doing. And these women here are actually farmers. And so they're learning how to, learning different things about aflatoxin, learning about the fall armyworm, which devastates the agricultural sector every year in Africa. Like 40% of the maize gets, in certain parts of Africa, gets destroyed because of this fall armyworm. So this is just a picture of that. You know, XR Global, you could go read up about our company. We're doing everything, like we said, from agriculture to beekeeping training to agricultural input training or agro businesses. And so we're partnered with several universities in southern part of Africa to be able to provide this education. What is the problem? You know, I mean, the thing is, we always look at employees forget about 90% of the information within a week from the day of training. And this is where I went back to our studies and what we've done from a study perspective. And, you know, the goal here on the slide, we talk about $370 billion US industry in 2019, and equates to over $33 billion US wasted. So this is amazing how this technology can change and be able to fix a lot of these issues that we have within this problem sector. Learning and development, the pain points we see here: retention, less than 50% of the content from learning programs are forgotten within the first hour, 75% within 6 hours. We saw learning engagement is down. Relevance is a big problem. Language barriers. Most trainings that are done, they want it done in English, but they don't do it in the local dialects. And this is something that with VR, you can go in there and do this. And so this is some of the problems that we have seen, and this is the problems that we're going to overcome. The solution with immersion technology, and most people have seen this, this pyramid here, but it really speaks volumes when you talk about how we teach in schools every day is a lecture. And what is the retention rates of a lecture? 5%. We've done these studies in Rwanda, and we're seeing this over and over again, that retention levels in lecturing, reading, and even audio visual, like we're doing this PowerPoint, is only 20%. But when we get to VR, the studies show this is actually from the National Training Laboratories at Deloitte, 75% retention rates with the use of VR training. So this is magical numbers. If we could get people to use this technology, this is what you're going to see. 4 times more focused learners are than e-learning peers. And when we talk about that, that is crazy when you're looking at computer-based training versus VR. I mean, it's a win to go this way. So this is our solution. This is what we're all about. 45% increase in knowledge retention versus 5%. It decreases training time by an average of 60%. We're seeing courses that most of our clients give us that are about 4 hours long in traditional training. We're able to get those down by 60%. Offline, we talk about offline training and some of those things, and online training, those methodologies is really where our delivery is happening within Africa. The case study that we did with the Feed the Future in Rwanda, this was a part of USAID. We actually seen those results where we took smallholder farmers, brought in a group of them, and we did a baseline study. They scored a 43%. And then after the course, the traditional training, after 4 hours, they only scored a 47%. So only a 5% increase in knowledge retention. We actually then took the other group and put them in a VR training with a mobile. This was done on mobile phones using VR at the time, and they were able to go from 43% to 89.9% retention after only 30 minutes, which they were able to learn more in 30 minutes than they did in 4 hours. So we've done this, we're seeing these results, and this is the beauty of this. There's other studies out there. This is showing some of our retention rates with USAID in Rwanda. We also study the immersive learning and why it's stimulating a different part of the brain. This was a study done at Miami Children's Health System, and showing how VR is so impactful on the brain. So I know that I believe this study was done through PwC, where it showed that training in VR is 4 times faster than in a classroom. 275% more confident to apply skills learned after training. 3.75 times more emotionally connected to content than classroom learners, and 4 times more focused than their e-learning peers. This here, if we can change and get VR into schoolhouses, into our educational systems, in our governments, we could have smarter students. We could have kids finishing school because of washout rates. And we use that term washout, where some kids get stuck. And it's not because their brain doesn't work or that they have these issues. They just don't learn with lecturing. But we put them in VR, they pass the test. They score higher numbers. And this is an important thing for society today, to realize that VR should be used in the educational system.
It's amazing to see like this, how big the impact is in terms of, because people think scale is only in terms of numbers, like numbers of headsets being widespread, but not about time, because one of our biggest asset at the end of the day is time, right? So like,
that's right.
If we can reduce the time in different kinds of training to get the same or even better results, that's huge. And that's one of the main powers of VR.
One of the things that we're doing, and this is in rural areas, and we're rolling a beta out. We're beta testing it right now. So it's a really interesting model, is we're taking students in rural Africa, in the villages where they don't have electricity, they don't have running water, they don't have infrastructure, they don't even have schools. And it's hard to get a teacher to go live 14 hours in the bush, having no electricity, no water, and paying that teacher to teach. Most of them just refuse to do it. They don't want to live that way. And it's understandable. Our society is different than the society that is in these rural areas because of the cultures and just the history. But what we're doing as a company is going out into those areas and putting headsets in the hands of these villages, not just the children. And you say, well, how do they connect? Well, we are coming up with a headset, and we have this headset now that takes a 3G or 4G SIM card, sticks it into the headset, and now they're on the internet. And in these areas of Africa, we all have 4G and 5G. So the kids can put it on at 9 o'clock in the morning and be in a classroom with a teacher. Their teacher may be in a capital city, where teaching another course, but they're able to get the same education. So one of the things about XR Global is equal education. And so this is a solution that a lot of Ministry of Educations have struggled with. How do we train our youth when you have 52% of illiteracy in Mozambique alone? how do we get people trained? And what if we look at the global market of this, it's a massive problem of these rural areas not getting educated. So we're using VR as that way of delivering, and that's the impact that we're making. A lot of companies look at us a little different. Investors look at us a little different, and like, I wouldn't invest in that because maybe there's not a lot of residual income coming out of our company because of this. But the impact that we're making on people's lives is huge, way beyond. Name companies today that's trained over 65,000, 70,000 people in the last year in VR. I think we're one of the leading companies doing that, and especially in our market. So it's real exciting that we're seeing the impacts that we're making with VR.
Yeah, one thing that I mean, it's just amazing to imagine that emerging markets, it's very counterintuitive to think about emerging markets in VR, right? From a business standpoint. But in terms of impact, in terms of also business opportunities, it makes a lot of sense because these same markets, they have been struggling with their economic growth and also educational growth. So they don't have a lot of people that are capacitated in different fields. So VR can be the accelerator for that. And that's something definitely to consider, because if you have, let's say, and for everybody, like if anyone here that is watching works in a government and works with PPP, public-private partnerships, and you want to create an impactful program, don't think VR it's a fancy way of doing things or it's an expensive. It's not, because the impact in terms of scalability, speed, it's huge. So you can literally train kids or train adults in specific areas with a huge reduction of time. So, and that's key, that's really important. And that's something people should consider. VR can be a tool to accelerate the learning and that lack that we have in among our professionals, among our kids. VR can really cover that in the short term, and that's what I think it's amazing, because it's especially if it's a specific training. So, for example, those farmers that you showed, I thought it was amazing because what they are seeing there. It's essentially they were looking at specific types of the worm and how they operate and how they can identify, all these problems, all these different problems at crops. That's amazing. Just think about that. Like, they are seeing it, so it's going to be easier to identify. It's going to be easier to understand the process of the worm, understand that particular plague. Man, seriously, VR, it's that accelerating education that we all need. And now we are moving forward into this metaverse, which is going to be amazing to see what's going to happen. I want your insight about what do you think is the future of VR in the educational sector, not only in emerging markets, but in a general way. Like, what do you think about that?
Yeah, I think that, VR is never going to take the place of schools. We know that in today's society, there's too much money wrapped up into these institutions, but I could definitely see VR being used as as a supplement to teachers. And that's an important thing. So, for instance, a teacher says, hey, I want to take our kids on a field trip. We call it field trip in America. I don't know what it's called in Brazil. But basically, the kids can put a headset on and teleport themselves to anywhere in the world that they would have access to that data. And to be able to see a factory, or they can see where the cars are being manufactured, or maybe even get to speak to a high-ranking official within the government without having to go to his office, or that person going to the school. So these are some cool things that now we have access at our fingertips. Teachers need to embrace that. What if you want to show we have in chemistry, let's say chemistry just alone, a lab, you could build that in VR, and kids can actually do chemistry tests and chemistry experiments with the safety of VR. So if something explodes in VR, it's not going to hurt you, but it will hurt you if it was in real life. And today, I think there was a study came out, so many schools are shutting down chemistry labs because of those issues. So we can still do that type of training. We just do it in VR. So there's a lot of things there. There's things that, like teaching someone how to drive. It's dangerous to put a person behind a wheel of a car if they've never done it before. You can put them in VR and do it. Let me give you an example of how powerful it is in education, or not just on students, but let's say in the job market. There was a lady, and this was something that I was involved in. She worked for a port, a seaport, and she was involved in the back office, and she went through a 2-hour training with an Oculus and how to operate a crane that offloaded the containers from the ship. She did it. They had some controls. It was simulated, and she dropped a few of the containers, and we had a virtual person at the bottom that didn't make it, and a lot of hollering inside of VR. She did it. She did it for 2 hours. She actually did this practice for 2 hours in VR. She got at the point after 2 hours, they were able to take her and put her on that crane, and she actually was able to offload a ship with the same skills as someone who's been doing it for years. This is the power of VR.
Yeah.
And this is what's so important. We're seeing pilots use it. We're seeing airline people use it. We're teaching masonry training in Kenya with the use of it, of how to put the bricks and mortar and all of this together and build a foundation. So not just in schools, but it's going to be also adult learning. That's the beauty of what we're doing in Mozambique with the rollout of our multi-user virtual reality schools called the Meta Academy. Is not only kids get trained at 9 o'clock in the morning, but in the evening time, the parents can put it on and learn about nutrition, can learn about maize value chain, learn about fall armyworm, aflatoxins, and how to process honey. So we're teaching their parents using the same headset. So we're killing 2 birds with 1 stone in these villages without having to send experts for 14 hours into the bush to be able to train these people.
What a lot of people don't realize is that there are some, let's think about masons, for example, and I believe it's all around the world. It's very hard to find skilled labor for that. So and it's going to become a trend in the future. We're going to have more difficulties, hiring people to work in construction, and it's going to be a high paying job as well. Like the salary will increase eventually, and there are some specific training that can be conducted very quickly, and VR can expedite that tremendously. So like if you're 20 years old and maybe you want not only a side gig, maybe you want to go full-time and become a contractor in, let's say, in 2 years, VR can really speed things up. So for adult training, kids training, there are so many applications. I did recently an experience where I learned how to essentially to give a CPR to a newborn. I recently had a niece, I became an uncle, and it became like, for me, it became a thing. Like, I really want to learn all the things I can do to protect my niece. And I did a VR session, like 10 minutes, and it gave me like, it calmed me down a little bit. I became more relaxed about it. Now I can at least understand the procedures, the A, B, and C to be at my best in that situation. So that's great. To finish our conversation, I would like to hear, like, since you work with the government, what are the tips that you'd give to anyone that wants to work in VR, in the VR space, but also want to develop projects with the government? So, like, what are what would be your main tips that can help people developing B2G projects?
Yeah, I think that's a good question. I mean, one of the big challenges that we always face with governments is change. You got to find that champion within the government. And I think if you could find the champion within the government who can embrace this technology, then you can open a lot of doors. I've done what's called CRADAs with the US government, where they were research agreements where I didn't get paid, but I was able to be able to show them some technology and work with them and say, what's your pain point? And go that back and forth until we got something developed where the government was like, oh, we like that now, let's purchase it. So those are opportunities. I would definitely, if I was a company that was working, that's primarily focused on the government and how we can be impactful to those government departments, is go in and just show people what you have, or talk to them about it, and work, and don't try to have them embrace it all at once, but step by step, get them to get their buy-in on the design phase, get their, what is the pains, understanding the pains of the government, what are the challenges the government's having, and then work from there. You're not going to solve everything at once. You got to get to know what the pains are in the government. Once you can start having that relationship with those officials, then those doors are going to open up naturally for you.
That's a great advice. Bryan, thank you so much. Priscilla, do you want to any final comments, any thoughts?
Yeah, we are come to the end, and I want to say thank you, Bryan, for you stay here in the VR Day.
Thank you so much. It was a pleasure being here. And I look forward to traveling to Brazil one day soon and meet you guys all in person.
Nice,
Yes.
nice. It's going to be our pleasure.
Of course.
All right. Okay, Bryan, thank you so much. And thanks, everyone. Thanks for watching. This is VR Day.